Bruce Lee was stretching when 290-pound giant Scoffed, 8 seconds later owned. Bruce Lee was stretching when the 300-pound giant mocked, 8 seconds later, he learned his lesson. The gym smelled of sweat and worn leather. Bruce Lee, in his faded black kimono, moved with the precision of a Swiss watch, stretching his muscles before training. Her fingers brushed her toes, her legs spread in a perfect split, while the air around her seemed to curve with her concentration. It was then that he heard laughter. "Look at this," the voice was thick, full of disdain. "The little dragon doing ballerina poses." Bruce didn't need to look up to know who it was. Everyone in the gym knew Ivan the Bear Volkov, a Russian sambo fighter who had arrived 2 weeks ago, challenging anyone who dared face him. At 6 feet 1 inch and 300 pounds of muscle and compressed fat, Volkov was a walking mountain, used to crushing opponents with punches that made the ground shake. "You're supposed to be teaching dance, not kung fu," Volkov sneered, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "Or is that all you know how to do? Leg curls?" Bruce finished the stretch calmly, standing up slowly. His eyes, dark and sharp as blades, fixed on the giant. There was no anger in them, just a dangerous stillness. "I don't teach dancing," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "I teach respect." Volkov laughed, slapping his hands on his thighs. "Respect? You? A guy who barely reaches my chest?" He took a step forward, the shadow covering Bruce like a storm cloud. "I'll show you what respect is, Chinese. On the floor. Now." The gym fell silent. Even the weights stopped clanking. Everyone knew what would happen if Volkov got his hands on anyone. He had already left 3 fighters with broken ribs and 1 with a dislocated nose. But Bruce didn't move. He just tilted his head, as if evaluating a mathematical problem. 8 seconds, he murmured. "What?" Volkov frowned. "You said I wouldn't last 8 seconds on the floor with you." Bruce stepped to the side, his bare feet sliding across the mat as if they weren't touching the floor. "Let's see." The Russian growled and charged forward, fists raised like hammers. Bruce didn't back down. At the last moment, he dodged it with a fluid movement, like water running between the fingers of a closed fist. Volkov's punch passed inches from his face, so strong that the wind cut through the air. Before the giant could recover, Bruce spun, his right foot lashing out in a perfect roundhouse kick. The heel connected with Volkov's temple with a sharp crack. The Russian's eyes rolled back, and he staggered, trying to balance himself. But Bruce wasn't finished. With lightning speed, he closed in, grabbing Volkov's outstretched arm and twisting it into a flawless arm lock. The Russian tried to resist, but his body was no longer responding. The kick had destabilized his nervous system. Bruce applied pressure, and Volkov fell to his knees with a groan. "First second," Bruce said, his voice calm. Volkov tried to get up, but Bruce spun behind him, trapping his neck in a rear-naked choke. The giant grabbed Bruce's arms, his nails digging into the skin, but the technique was perfect. The seconds passed. 2, 3, 4. Volkov's movements slowed. His eyes widened, his mouth opened for air that wasn't coming. 5, 6. The Russian's body shuddered. He hit the mat twice, the universal sign of surrender. Bruce released him at exactly the 8th second. Volkov fell face down, panting, his cheek pressed to the floor. It took a long moment before he managed to turn around, his eyes still glassy. When he finally looked at Bruce, there was no longer any mockery on his face, just a mixture of shock and something that could be respect. "How?" he grumbled, his voice hoarse. Bruce held out his hand. Volkov hesitated, but accepted the help, being pulled up with a force that didn't match his opponent's size. "Size doesn't matter," Bruce said, adjusting his kimono. "What matters is how you use what you have." Volkov rubbed his neck, still dazed. Then, to everyone's surprise, he inclined his head in a gesture of recognition. I underestimated you." Bruce smiled, a quick flash of white teeth. Most do. The gym erupted in applause. Some laughed, others shook their heads in disbelief. But Volkov said nothing more. He just grabbed his towel and left, his shoulders hunched for the first time since he arrived. Days later, the Russian returned. Not to challenge, but to train. And, although he never admitted it out loud, he started calling Bruce his sensei. As for Bruce, he just went back to his stretches as if nothing had happened. Because for him, it had been nothing more than another day at work. And so, the legend grew. The weight of legend. The months that followed were strangely silent for Bruce. The dojo students commented in hushed tones on the change in Volkov, how the once arrogant Russian giant now moved with an almost reverent precision, as if each blow carried the weight of an unspoken debt. But Bruce didn't talk about it. He never talked about anything more than necessary. His routine was the same, waking up before dawn, stretching until his muscles burned, teaching basic techniques with a patience that disarmed even the most impatient. And yet, something had changed. Not on him. In them. The stories began to spread. First, among older students, then in the city's bars and gyms, until they reached the ears of those who shouldn't hear. A man in a gray suit, with scars on his knuckles, appeared at the dojo one afternoon, watching the training with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you have a knack for taming beasts," he said, as Bruce adjusted the sash of a beginning student. Bruce didn't look up. "Depends on what you call talent." The man laughed, a dry sound like burning paper. "I call it an opportunity. There is a ring in Macau. Good money. Very good. And a Russian you know well is willing to fight for an extra purse, if you're on the card." Bruce finally looked at him. The man didn't blink. "I don't fight for money." "No?" The smile widened. "So I fight for revenge?" A silence weighed in the air. Bruce knew what that meant. The man was not there by chance. Someone had spoken. Someone who knew his past. "Who sent you?" "A friend. Or rather, a former friend." The man took a card out of his pocket and placed it on the mat, near Bruce's feet. "Think about it. You have 1 week." He left before Bruce could respond. But the words had already taken root. Volkov noticed the change immediately. Bruce was quieter, more tense, as if he carried an invisible blade in his back. On the third day, the Russian cornered him in the locker room, blocking the exit with his massive body. Who was that man? Bruce didn't look away. No one important. Lie. Volkov crossed his arms. "You look different." As if he was waiting for a fight that won't happen here. Bruce sighed, running a hand over his face. "It's none of your business." "It's my business," Volkov growled. "You taught me how to fight. This makes you responsible for where I use what I learned." Bruce stared at him for a long moment. Then something in his expression broke. "There is a ring in Macau. They want me to fight. And they want you to be there too." Volkov frowned. "Why?" "Because you know I won't turn down a fight if you're in the middle." The Russian let out a bitter laugh. "So that's it? They know you better than I do." "No," Bruce shook his head. "They just know how to mess with people." The trip to Macau was silent. Volkov insisted on coming along, as if his presence could somehow prevent the inevitable. Bruce didn't argue. "I knew it wouldn't help." The ring was underground, hidden behind a steel door in a dank alley. Men in suits walked around with briefcases, betting on numbers that only they understood. In the center, a blank-eyed TIE fighter waited, his hands bandaged with ropes that glowed in the dim light. "Last chance," said the man in the gray suit, appearing next to Bruce. "You go up now, or Volkov goes up in your place." Bruce looked at the Russian. Volkov held his gaze, but there was something new in his expression, fear, perhaps, or resignation. "No," Bruce said finally. I'll go up. The man smiled. I knew you were smart. The fight was not clean. The Thai fought like a caged animal, biting, scratching, kicking below the waist. Bruce defended himself, but didn't fight back. Not at first. He let the other get tired, he let his anger blind him, his blows lose their precision. Only then did he attack. Not with force. Efficiently. A punch to the liver, a kick to the kneecap, a choke that made the Thai collapse like a bag of bones. The audience screamed, some cursing, others applauding. But Bruce didn't wait for the verdict. He got down from the ring, grabbed a towel and walked towards the exit. Volkov intercepted him. You could have finished him in the first round. I could, Bruce admitted. But it wasn't what they wanted. And what did they want? Bruce looked at the man in the gray suit, who was observing the scene with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Proof that I'm still the same. On the plane back, Volkov broke the silence. They will come back. I know. And you're going to fight again? Bruce closed his eyes. Not if I don't have to. Volkov snorted. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The Russian didn't insist. But when the plane landed, he grabbed Bruce's arm before he could get out. If you need me, I'll come. Bruce looked at the huge hand on his arm, then at Volkov's scarred face. I know. The following months were strangely peaceful. The dojo prospered. New students arrived, attracted by the legend that grew around the man who had tamed the Russian. Bruce kept teaching, kept stretching, kept pretending nothing had changed. Until, one night, the man in the gray suit returned. This time, I wasn't alone. Behind him, a fighter with dark skin and scars on his face smiled, showing gold teeth. Do you remember Kofi? Asked the man. He has a better proposal. A tournament. 3 fights. Enough money so you never have to teach again. Bruce didn't look at Kofi. He looked at the man. What if I say no? The man's smile widened. Then Volkov will fight in your place. And we both know how this will end. Bruce felt the weight of the choice like a stone in his chest. But this time, he didn't hesitate. I fight. The tournament was in Bangkok. 3 nights, 3 opponents, no rest. Kofi was first. A monster of muscles and technique, who fought as if each blow was a promise of death. Bruce held on. It bled. But in the 3rd round, when Kofi pinned him against the ropes, he saw something in the other man's eyes, something that wasn't hate, not anger, but fear. And then he understood. They didn't want him to win. They wanted him to break. In between fights, Volkov found him in the locker rooms, his face pale. You don't have to do that. I need it, Bruce said, wrapping a bandage around his injured hand. If I don't fight, they'll come after you. Or the students. Or the dojo. Volkov clenched his fists. Then I'll go in your place. No, Bruce looked at him. Because if you get in that ring, they will kill you. And I won't let that happen. The Russian opened his mouth to protest, but Bruce interrupted him. Trust in me. The second fight was worse. A Japanese man with cold eyes, who didn't speak, didn't smile, demonstrated nothing more than surgical precision. Bruce got kicked in the ribs that made him see stars. On the ground, as the referee counted, he saw Volkov get up from his chair, ready to invade the ring. And then he remembered his former master's words, true strength isn't in winning. It's in knowing when not to fight. As the Japanese approached for the final blow, Bruce rolled to the side, grabbed his opponent's ankle and twisted it hard. The bone broke with a sharp crack. The Japanese fell, howling. Bruce stood up, panting, and looked at the man in the gray suit. He arrives. The man laughed. You don't decide when it ends. I decide, said Bruce. And it's over. They returned home the next day. Volkov didn't speak the entire flight. But when they reached the dojo, he turned to Bruce. "What are you going to do now?" Bruce looked at his hands, still swollen, still scarred. "I'll teach." "And them?" "They will come back." Bruce sighed. "But not today." Volkov nodded, as if that made sense. "Then I'll be here." Bruce smiled, for the first time in a long time. "I know." The years passed. The dojo aged, the walls gained new marks, new students arrived and left. Volkov never fought professionally again, but he became Bruce's right-hand man, teaching younger people the same lesson he had learned, that strength is not in size, but in the way you use it. And Bruce? Bruce continued stretching. Because, in the end, that was all he knew how to do. The dojo and the ghosts of the past. The first years were not easy. The dojo, once a place of discipline and silence, now echoed with the sound of hesitant footsteps and nervous laughter. Bruce watched everything from his corner, his fingers tracing the scars on his knuckles as the new students settled in on the mats. Some came out of curiosity, others out of necessity, men and women carrying their own battles, visible or not. But there was one group, in particular, who kept coming back, the same faces that had appeared that night, months ago, when the ring still smelled of sweat and blood. They arrived at different times, as if they didn't want to be seen together. First, the big man with the red beard, who everyone called Bear, and who now moved with a caution he hadn't had before. Then the sharp-eyed woman, Blade, who never took off her gloves, even in the heat. Lastly, the youngest, Gavallo, who was still looking at Bruce as if he was waiting for an order to attack. They didn't talk about what had happened. They didn't need to. It was Volkov who broke the ice. One night, after the last students had left, he approached Bruce, who was adjusting the strings on a new punching bag. "They're training alone," said Volkov, crossing his arms. "After hours." Bruce didn't look up. "I know. Aren't you going to say anything?" "They are not my prisoners." Volkov snorted, but did not insist. I knew Bruce was right. Those three weren't there out of obligation. They were there because, at some point, they had understood that they needed something beyond the violence they knew. And, as much as Bruce wouldn't admit it, he needed them too. The Bear's lesson. Bear was the first to break the silence. It was a summer afternoon, the air heavy with the smell of sweat and liniment. The big man was alone in the dojo, punching the bag with contained fury, the blows so hard they made the ground shake. Bruce entered without making a sound, but Bear saw him in his reflection in the mirror. "Are you going to just stand there, or are you going to tell me I'm doing it wrong?" He growled, without stopping hitting. Bruce walked over, grabbed a towel and threw it over the man's shoulder. "You're wasting energy." Bear stopped, hands still clenched, chest heaving. "I don't know how to do it differently." "Then learn." They stood there, facing each other, until Bear exhaled heavily and sat down on the mat, his back against the wall. "I didn't want to go back," he admitted. "After that night. I swore I would never set foot in a place like this again." Bruce sat down next to him, knees creaking. "And why did you come back?" "Because I still wake up in the middle of the night with the taste of blood in my mouth." Bear closed his eyes. "Because I can't look in a mirror without seeing the face of that guy I almost killed. Because, fuck, I don't know who I am if I'm not a fighter." Bruce didn't say anything. He just extended his hand, offering a glass of water that he had brought. Bear accepted and drank in silence. "You're not a fighter," Bruce said finally. "You are a man who fights. There's a difference." Bear laughed bitterly. "And what does that make me? A philosopher?" "It makes you someone who still has a choice." Blade redemption. Blade never took off his gloves. Even on the hottest days, she trained in them, as if they were a second skin. Bruce noticed, but didn't ask. Some secrets were like wounds, best not to poke. Until one day, she appeared with bare hands. I was alone in the dojo, working on a series of quick kicks, when Bruce entered. She stopped mid-motion, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. For a second he hesitated. Then he held out his hands. The scars were old but still visible, burn marks that snaked up her wrists and forearms. "I don't like people to see," he said, his voice low. Bruce didn't look away. "You don't need to hide it. It's not that." She closed her hands, as if she could protect the marks. "It's just, I don't want you to feel sorry. No one here will feel sorry for you." Blade let out a dry laugh. "You haven't seen how they look. They look because they are afraid." Bruce approached, took one of her hands and turned it over, examining the scars as if they were a map. "But fear is not the same as pity." She pulled her hand back, but not as quickly as before. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Nothing." Bruce shrugged. "Just don't pretend it doesn't exist." The flight of the hawk. Gaveo was the youngest, the fastest, the most impatient. He always arrived early, always left late, always with a question on the tip of his tongue. Bruce watched him from afar, like a hawk watching its prey, or perhaps its chick. One night, after everyone had left, Hawkeye stayed behind, wrapping his hand wraps with exaggerated precision. "Are you going to teach me how to really fight?" he asked, without looking at Bruce. "You already know how to fight." "Not like you." Bruce sighed. He grabbed a pair of training gloves and threw them to the boy. "Then show me." Gavio hesitated, then put them on. They positioned themselves in the center of the mat, and Bruce gestured for him to attack. The boy moved forward, quickly, but Bruce dodged it easily, counterattacking with a soft blow to the shoulder. Again. Gavio tried again. And another. And another. With each attempt, Bruce knocked him down with a minimal movement, as if he was playing with him. "Why don't you hit me?" Gaveo asked, frustrated, after taking another fall. "Because you're not ready." "When will I be there?" Bruce reached out his hand and helped the boy up. "When you understand that fighting isn't just about hitting someone else. It's knowing when not to get it right." Hawkeye frowned, but didn't argue. I knew Bruce wouldn't give any more explanations. So, instead of insisting, he took a deep breath and returned to position. They trained until the moon was high in the sky. The legacy. The years passed, and the dojo became more than a training place. It became a refuge. A home. Bear stopped drinking. Lamina began teaching self-defense to women. Gavio became the first student to win a regional tournament. And Volkov? Volkov was still there, always in the same corner, always ready for a harsh word or wise advice. Bruce, in turn, continued stretching. But now, sometimes, he looked at the students, the new ones, the old ones, the ones coming and going, and allowed a smile to touch his lips. It wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of someone who had finally found something worth protecting. And, on quiet nights, when the dojo was empty and the silence was complete, he would close his eyes and hear the echo of all the fights he had ever fought. Not the ones in the ring. The others. The ones that mattered.